So welcome to Comic Books and Graphic Novels in Focus, which is part of Forced Migrations and the Arts Online. The meeting is being recorded, so just to let you know that. So by staying in the meeting, you consent to being recorded. I guess when Ambrose manages to sort out his sound, he'll probably give an introduction and do some context further for the actual series of Forced Migration and the Arts. But I guess what we can start off is by just introducing the guests for this session. I'll go last, but I will introduce, who have we got then? We've got Reza and Dr. Liza Schuster. So shall we start with you? If you'd like to just give a little introduction to who you are, that'd be great. Thank you.
So my name is Liza Schuster, and I'm going to translate for Reza because Reza speaks Farsi and French. Tu peux t'en traduire très brièvement. C'est pas le.
Ah oui, je m'appelle Reza Sahibdad.
My name is Reza Sahibdad.
Je suis ouvrier, réalisateur, voilà,
I'm a worker and an artist. So Reza is based in France, originally from Afghanistan.
Okay, lovely. Zainab, are you there, Zainab? Yeah, lovely.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can, thank you.
Yeah, so hi everyone, my name is Zainab Abdi. I am an author. I have collaborated with many books, and this is the first time I had my first graphic novel book. I'm originally from Yemen and Somalia. I live currently in the US, United States. And I have been doing work around migration and refugee-related advocacy. And also, I am a storyteller. Been talking and speaking at the United Nations related to a war and conflict around the world and how that impacts young people who are being forced to flee. So I'm really excited to be here with you. I am a professional practitioner by with my master's degree from Columbia University. So I have been using all my skill set as a storyteller and an advocate to do some work related to development practitioner around the world. So I'm excited to be here with you all.
Thank you, Sam, for starting the session. So maybe we also have you introduce yourself, Sam.
Hi, yeah, so I'm Sam Hall, and I'm a writer and former journalist. I currently run community literary projects such as festivals and poetry events, as well as since 2020 writing and illustrating my own work. So yeah, that's basically what I do. So I guess I'll talk later about the graphic novel that I've adapted from a play that I wrote back in about 2016. So that's me.
Okay, thank you very much. So maybe what I do now is I introduce forced migration in the arts. Forced migration in the arts, what it aims to do is it aims to bring together people with lived experience of forced migration, artists, academics, and activists for conversation, and also to share ideas and possibly also explore ways of collaborating with one another. So for today's session, as Sam pointed out, we are focusing on comic books and graphic novels. And our speakers are Esia, Zainab Abdi, Reza Sahibdad, and Sam Hall. I suppose one of the questions that we could start with is you taking turns to talk about where you are and what is happening where you are around forced migration. I don't know who wants to start. Maybe let's start with you, Sam. Maybe if you could say something about where you are, what's happening there around forced migration.
Well, I live in Medway in Kent, and my kind of interest in the topic is in human trafficking, because probably about 7 years ago now, I was approached by Merton Against Trafficking to write something to be performed at an event, to raise knowledge of human trafficking and also to raise funds for the organisation. And I wrote 2 short pieces for the event. And then in 2016, I expanded the pieces into a play, which is called My Mind is Free. And that's been performed at various community venues and on various tours. And it was also performed by Mildred's Umbrella Theatre Company in America to also raise awareness and money. And then in 2020, I was actually awarded Arts Council England funding to develop my practice to adapt the play into a graphic novel. So the premise of the graphic novel is that after an infuriating interview with a bigoted and ill-informed celebrity commentator, journalist Zadie and her producer set out to tell the real human stories of human trafficking. And also listening to the radio show is the driver of an anonymous white van. The van crashes and 4 people who were hiding in the back are free, and they make their way deep into the forest, not knowing what to do next. So anecdotally, where I live in Medway, there are certain areas where trafficking is kind of known to be quite high. And living also near to kind of the ports of Dover and Folkestone, it's also something that it's kind of on the horizon. So my play and my graphic novel, so this is the graphic novel, tells the story of 4 victims of different kinds of trafficking who've all been brought to the UK, or one of them's actually from the UK. So we've got a young boy from Vietnam who's forced to look after a cannabis farm, a teenager from Romania who is a victim of sex trafficking, a forced labour victim from the UK, and also a woman from Brazil who finds herself in domestic servitude. So at the time that I wrote the play, these were the most frequent kinds of trafficking reported in the UK, although I think it's slightly changed now. So I undertook a lot of research to write the play initially, then more research when I was adapting the play into a graphic novel, because obviously the information has changed slightly and the situation's moved on a bit. So the stories and the characters are fictional, but they're all based on real stories that I found during my research, and experiences that survivors of human trafficking have spoken about. So because I'm a former journalist, I describe the book as speculative journalism. So it's like journalism based on fact, but told as fiction. So I also spoke to charities that deal with trafficked people, and spoke to 2 people who had first-hand experience of being trafficked, and their stories were anonymized and fed into the story. And then Dr. Alicia Hayes from the Wilberforce Institute was kind enough to check an early draft and give me feedback. So that's kind of like the story of my graphic novel and the play. Yeah, so there's kind of like 4 main victims, and 1 crusading journalist, and the journalist is like investigating their stories. And throughout the book, you learn about human trafficking, and you find out about the individual stories.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. How about you, Reza? If you could maybe say something about your own book.
So this is Reza, and he's going to present himself and talk about his experience.
Je m'appelle Reza Sahibdad.
My name is Reza Sahibdad.
À 28 ans, je suis arrivé en France et j'ai compris que je devrais apprendre par cœur ma date de naissance. Oui, peut-être j'explique ça, ça vient d'où?
Non, juste continue.
Ok, je suis arrivé en France, j'ai compris que je devrais apprendre par cœur ma date de naissance, car c'est important à ce côté de monde.
At 28 years of age, I arrived in France and I learned, or I understood, that it was necessary to learn my date of birth by heart, because this was an important piece of information this part of the world.
Je suis donc né le 12 mars 1980 à Mashhad, en Iran, mais je suis pas iranien.
I was born on the 12th of March 1980 at Mashhad in Iran, but I am Afghan, belonging to the ethnic group Hazara.
À 7 ans à l'école, la maîtresse m'a obligé de lever la main pour dire devant tout le monde que j'étais un Afghan.
At 7 years of age, my school teacher forced me to raise my hand to say that I was an Afghan in front of everybody.
Pendant toutes mes années d'école, ça a continué.
For every year of my school life, school started like that.
À 8 ans, j'ai compris qu'il y avait une guerre chez mes parents, entre les Mustachos et les Barbus.
At 8 years of age, I understood that there was a war in my parents' home between those with mustaches and those with beards.
À 9 ans, je pouvais lire sur les affiches dans la rue, ce pays est beau, mais ce n'est pas la vôtre.
At 9 years old, I was able to read on posters in the street, "This is a beautiful country, but it's not yours."
Vous savez-vous que vous n'avez pas le droit de vous marier avec un Afghan?
Or, do you know that you don't have the right to marry an Afghan?
À 10 ans, j'ai commencé à travailler avec des adultes.
At 10 years old, I started work alongside adults.
À 11 ans, j'ai fugué le soir pour regarder en cachette des VHS interdits.
At 11, I would run away at night to watch in secret video cassettes.
Trouvé au marché noir et j'ai découvert le cinéma de Bollywood.
This is how, found in the black market, I discovered Bollywood cinema.
À 12 ans, j'ai accompagné ma mère à la prison pour rendre visite à mon frère prisonnier politique.
At 12, I accompanied my mother to the prison to visit my brother, who was a political prisoner.
À 13 ans, j'ai compris que les Iraniens n'aiment pas mon petit nez et mes yeux en amande.
At 13, I understood that Iranians did not like my small nose and my slanted eyes.
À 15 ans, j'ai appris à échapper au contrôle de la police et devenir invisible aux yeux des Iraniens.
At 15, I had learned how to escape the police checkpoints and to become invisible to Iranians.
À 16 ans, l'école était finie pour moi, afghan, et je commençais à travailler de nuit.
At 16, I was no longer allowed to stay in school, and so I started working at night.
À 19 ans, j'ai compris que finalement, j'avais eu de la chance d'être né en Iran, car les talibans sont arrivés et ont essayé une fois plus d'effacer les Hazaras sur la surface d'Afghanistan.
At 19 years of age, I finally understood that actually I was lucky to be born in Iran, because there was a war in Afghanistan, and the Taliban had arrived and had decided to erase Hazara from the face of Afghanistan.
Les Tadjiks au Tadjikistan, les Ouzbeks au Ouzbékistan et les Hazaras au Paristan.
And so they said the Tajiks should go back to Tajikistan, the Uzbeks to Uzbekistan, and the Hazara to the cemetery.
À 3 ans, j'ai risqué 7 ans de prison pour voter pour Khatami, le candidat présidentiel de l'Iran, avec des faux papiers croyant qu'il va reformer l'Iran.
At 23, I risked 7 years of prison to vote for Khatami as president of Iran. I voted with false papers, hoping that he would reform the country.
À 24 ans, j'ai payé un fonctionnaire avec 5 grammes d'opium pour avoir une autorisation de tournage.
At 24 years of age, I bribed a functionary, a civil servant, with 5 grams of opium so that I could have a permit to turn my first film.
À 25 ans, je me suis trouvé dans le désert d'Irak, menacé par un passeur armé d'un Kalachnikov.
At 25 years, I found myself in the desert in Iraq, threatened by a smuggler with a Kalashnikov.
À 26 ans, je me suis déguisé en imam pour échapper au contrôle de la police et me rendre au cours de cinéma d'Abbas Kiarostami.
At 26, I disguised myself as an imam to escape police controls in order to get to a course of cinema run by Abbas Kiarostami.
À 27 ans, j'ai décidé d'entrer dans un centre de soins car le crack avait transformé ma vie en enfer.
At 27 years of age, I decided to go into a detoxification house to try and get rid of my addiction to crack, which had turned my life into hell.
La même année, j'ai reçu un prix de la main du président Mahmoud Ahmadinejad pour mes films.
And the same year, I received a prize from the hand of President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad for one of my films.
À 28 ans, je suis retourné en Afghanistan et là encore, j'ai reçu de la haine pour mon petit nez et mes yeux en amande, mais aussi pour mon accent iranien et mon athéisme, cette fois de la part de mes compatriotes.
At 28, I returned to Afghanistan for the first time. And there also I was hated for my small nose and my slanted eyes, but also for my Iranian accent and my atheism, this time by my compatriots.
À 29 ans, j'ai croisé le pape et je suis devenu SDF dans la rue de Paris.
At 29, I met the Pope and I became homeless in the streets of Paris.
À 30 ans, seul, sans contact, sans argent, sans papier, j'ai réalisé un film sur les Afghans sans papier.
Contacts, without money, without papers, I created a film about Afghans without papers, without money, and without a voice.
À 32 ans, j'ai lu ma première bande dessinée et j'ai découvert le roman graphique.
I was 32 when I read my first comic book and discovered graphic novels.
À 34 ans, je me suis marié et j'ai compris que je pouvais sortir de chez moi sans avoir peur.
At 34, I married and I understood what it was to leave home without fear.
À 35 ans, je suis devenu père d'une petite fille, à moitié Hazara et moitié breton.
At 35, I became the father of a little girl, half Breton and half Hazara.
À 37 ans, j'ai commencé à rêver d'un roman graphique autobiographique.
And at 37, I started to dream of an autobiography written as a graphic novel.
À 38 ans, j'ai organisé la projection de mon dernier film, Welcome to Paristan, 75.
At 38, I organized the screening of my last film, Welcome to Paristan.
À 39 ans, j'ai rencontré Yann, j'ai adoré son travail, j'ai lui accepté d'ajouter son art à mon histoire.
At 39, I met Yann. I adored his work, and he agreed to lend his art to my story. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Reza. Thank you very much. And then we hear from Zainab.
Hello? Yeah. Thank you, Reza, for sharing. That was really touchful. And so my name is Zainab. I'm a refugee from Somalia and Yemen. My family fled the civil war in Somalia to Yemen, and that's where I spent majority of my life. So my graphic novel talks mainly about my experience of being a refugee in Yemen and then fleeing to Egypt and experiencing the second Arab Spring there, and going through the whole asylum seeker and coming to the US, and then talks about my sister's journey, because me and my sister applied for an asylum seeker, but only me got accepted, while her application was rejected, where she ended up taking a different journey that is familiar to so many people, about taking the boat from Egypt to Italy to make it to Europe. And that was like really horrifying journey for her, but also for us to not know what's next for her. And within my graphic novel, I really wanted to put like images to those stories that people don't understand the journey of fleeing from a place to another place. And talking more about like what does it mean, like living in the midst of war and conflict in Yemen in a young age. The unique things about the book, it has different languages. So it starts with English, and the other side is in Arabic. So it meets in the middle. So the same images, same stories are written in Arabic, and the other side is in English. And it's really important because when I think about Voice for Refuge, majority of the audience in graphic novels is in English, and I feel like there is less graphic novel in Arabic, and that's why I wanted this to be bilingual, because it's important for not only this story to empower people in the West to understand the experience of refugees, but also for refugees who are like me in refugee camp and other places whose their first language is in Arabic, to find voice within themselves within this story, and understand that the journey of refugees, as much as it could be similar, um, the needs and the desire and advocacy is the same pathway. So that's where Voice for Refuge came, and it's mainly my journey and my sister's journey. And a little bit I will share with you about the whole thing that led to me fleeing to the US was in 2010, especially end of 2010, many countries in the Middle East, starting with Tunisia, they had the Arab Spring, which is young people saying no to corrupted government, saying no to um, leaders who have been in the office for longer than 30 years. And Yemen was one of the countries that inspired to do the same. A young revolution that led by young people with aspiration of having better education, better economic, and better future. As you've seen in the news, many of those Arab Spring revolutionists ended up in a horrific time where countries and government did not want the voice of um, activists and the voice of people going out the street to be heard. There has been silence in the media. A lot of people in the West had no idea what was going on. And a lot of stories in the ground has been diminished, and only things you see is just statistics and numbers of how many hundreds people died in the protests and how many people are in jail, and the conflict that keeps going. And with the Yemen situation, we just hear numbers of 2 million people are malnourished and more, and a lot of people dying due to starvations. But there is no names and pictures and image to those stories. And the moment I left Yemen to Egypt, I was thinking that will be the end of the horrific things that was going on in Yemen. But during that time, we had the military coup by the new elected president right now, and that divided the whole Egyptian country into the military and opposition to the military coup. And that's when the US embassy got closed, where it delayed my process and the process of me and my sister to be able to come to the US and do the whole interview system. So we stayed there for 2 years. I got sick with TB, and that worsened my health condition and also worsened my application process. As you know, in the US, especially if you have severe illness, you're not able to come to the US, which means I have to stay in the middle of the conflict that was going on in Egypt. And experiencing that before the age of 18 was a lot of trauma that I had to carry from a place to place, including generation trauma of my mom having to flee from Somalia. So in the end of the journey talks, in the book especially, talks about me coming to the US and realizing that the whole media presenting about the stories of what's happening in Yemen and the Middle East. And in 2015, we seen the presidential election and the whole call for banning Muslim from entering the United States, and the fear and building the walls and all that fear of allowing immigrants to be able to come to countries. It led me to understand that my story and the story of young people like me are not being heard. And the narrative on the news is just one narrow narrative of fear of not allowing immigrants to come. And that's when I started my advocacy journey of like sharing my story, telling my story within neighborhoods, within places. And that's where I attract global leaders, including Malala, where I met her in 2016, and she invited me to speak at the UN and share my stories. And then from there, I collaborated on multiple books with other authors, including Malala's recent book, We Are Displaced, where I had 3 chapters talking about my story. And then The Voice for Refuge was my first solo book as an author and a graphic novel. And the good news, it just came out recently. Voice for Refuge won the Silver Medal Award for a graphic novel through the Moonbeam National Award. So that was like really great achievement to see it within less than 6 months, the book to be recognized in that global category. So the whole aim of Voice for Refuge is shifting narrative, claiming voices and claiming spaces when it comes to the experience of refugees. We are not numbers. We are not a tragedy that happened to a certain country. We are people, we are dreamers, we are activists, we are change makers. And that's what this book is doing. This book is reflecting the young journey of Zainab, who have gone through a lot before the age of 18, but did not let that stop her from claiming the horizon. And the stories of refugees shouldn't be celebrated only on us being achievers and change makers, but also including who we were before becoming a refugee and how we become refugee and the journey between. And that's where this book talks about the journey before, the journey between, and the journey right now and for the future. So that's a little bit about my journey and how that led me to writing this book.
Very much, Zainab. Thank you. I've got a few questions, but I'll come back to them shortly. But for now, we hear from Asia. And also, if anyone listening has got questions, please write them down or put them in the chat. We'll come back to them.
Hello, I'm Ася. I like to draw, and I'm 22. I'm from Kharkiv, which is in Ukraine, and currently I'm based in United Kingdom, temporarily, hopefully. So I'm here because I was working on, of course, a graphic novel. I was working on it since last year's October, and it's still in progress and not published, but I'm still talking about it. Anyway, so obviously the graphic novel is what had happened to me since February 2022. It's a collection of short stories, and it's very focused on exactly personal perceptions of war, and mainly on mental health and impact of war on a single individual. Yeah. So I think it's nice that I am offering a very personal perspective, especially a perspective of a young person, because people of my age are primary force, which is volunteering to fight the war, and are an ideological core of Ukrainian resistance, if you can call it that. Yeah, I think my graphic novel will be something unusual because it's about Ukrainian culture and history, and also it's not very serious and tries to view events from a more sarcastic point of view, because that's the nature of a lot of things in this conflict. And also, of course, it talks about some stuff which could be important for Western audience specifically, because a huge problem of this war is all the propaganda and informational noise and how it affects single individuals and their perception of reality. And I'm making a huge emphasis on this in the book, and how it works with one's mind is something I hope a lot of people on the West can relate to. And that's all, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Asia. I don't know if I'm pronouncing your name correctly.
You won't be able to, and no one can,
No.
mostly.
How do you pronounce it?
Ася.
Asia.
Yeah, so ya is pronounced like Ася, and this sound is a problem for a lot of people here, where everyone speaks English or something.
Thank you, Asia. I don't know. So what I was also hoping we could do is we could look at questions around forced migration, itself, and talk about what we are finding in the places where we are best, and also, what is missing, what needs to happen, and how we can make it happen. Zainab mentioned some of those issues when she was talking about how while she got refugee status, her sister didn't. And then she also mentioned the hostility that is in the American mainstream media around, especially the anti-Muslim hostility, and also generally the anti-migrant, anti-refugee rhetoric that is there. Maybe if we take it in turns to talk about where we are based and what is happening there, and also what you think are the causes behind what is happening, and also what needs to happen instead. We'll start the way we started, with Sam, and then Reza, Zainab, and Estia. Over to you, Sam. It seems we're having connectivity issues. Who wants to? Maybe we'll go to Reza, and when Sam comes in, she comes in.
Moi, je vais vous parler un peu sur mon expérience. Moi, je suis arrivé en 2008 en France.
So I can tell you a little bit about my experience. I arrived in 2008 in France.
Alors, arrivant à Paris, on vivait dans l'aéroport avec on était à peu près 100 Afghans.
So at that time you arrived into Paris and we were left to sleep in the streets. There were about 100 Afghans all together sleeping in a park near the Gare de l'Est.
Ouais. Et plupart à l'époque, ils restaient pas en France. Ils partaient soit vers Angleterre, soit vers Scandinavie.
And most of those people didn't in fact stay in France. They moved on either to Scandinavia, Sweden, Norway, Denmark, or to England.
Parce que c'était très difficile d'avoir les papiers en France.
Because at that time it was really difficult to get papers in France.
Ceux qui restaient, ils n'avaient pas le choix normalement d'aller plus loin. C'était mon cas, j'avais plus d'argent.
And those who stayed tended to be those who ran out of money, like me.
Donc, les gens qu'on a restés, on était à peu près 20 personnes qu'on a fait notre demande d'asile à peu près en même temps.
So out of those 100 people, maybe 20 of us stopped, and we made our demand for asylum at the same time, or request for asylum at the same time?
Sur ces 20 personnes, on était moi, j'étais un peu artiste, je faisais des films. Il y avait un journaliste. On a eu nos papiers 2 ans après d'attente. Oui, 2 ans d'attente après on a eu nos papiers.
And out of those 20 people, I was an artist and there was a journalist, and we received our papers after 2 years.
Mais les restes, ils n'étaient pas des gens artistes ou journalistes, c'était des gens ordinaires qui travaillaient durement chez eux en Iran, par exemple. Et eux, ils ont attendu certains 5 ans, 6 ans, 10 ans après, ils ont leur papier.
But out of the remaining 18 people, most were workers, construction workers, people who had worked really hard all their lives, either in Iran or Afghanistan, because many Afghans are exiled in Iran, as Reza was. And for them, some got their papers after 5 years, after 6 years, and in some cases after 10 years.
Le journaliste, il s'est présenté avec moi en même temps. Il est arrivé, moi aussi je suis arrivé facilement avec invitation d'un festival. Mais lui, il pensait plus haut que les autres parce qu'il est arrivé avec passeport à la France d'air d'asile. Il disait, moi, je suis pas comme les autres. Vous me devrez accueillir meilleur que les autres parce que je suis un journaliste.
I arrived with, because I had been invited to Italy to receive a prize for one of my films, and that allowed me to get to Europe relatively easily. So I had a relatively easy journey compared to most of the other people that we met. The journalist had arrived in Paris with a passport, and he arrived at the office where we placed our demands. But he thought himself better than everyone else and wanted to be treated differently, arguing, I'm not like the others, I'm a real refugee.
Je crois que la situation n'a pas changé vraiment.
That's a bit our situation, my situation when I arrived.
Thank you, Reza. Thank you. Yeah. Why do you think? Why do you think there is that long wait? Why do you think France lets people wait that long?
Pourquoi tu penses qu'on se fait attendre les gens aussi longtemps? Mais la France est beaucoup moins longue que l'Angleterre en ce moment. Bah, pourquoi?
Pour moi, c'est une décision politique. C'est la politique qui décide pour ce genre de choses. Et dans leur intérêt politique, c'est...
Et j'espère que les gens...
Voilà, c'est ça. Voilà. Et je pouvais expliquer un peu la situation. Comme je donne un exemple, on a une vache ici. S'il n'a pas de papier, cette vache-là, on peut le profiter à fond. Du coup, en fait, quand on ne donne pas les papiers à des gens, on le laisse que la société l'exploite et l'État l'exploite. Du coup, on a une vache comme ça, pourquoi on ne profite pas de cette vache, quoi.
So Reza has said that although it's worth noting that especially for Afghans, the wait is much shorter in France today than in England, much shorter. But actually it serves the country's interest to leave people in this vulnerable situation, either because it forces them, encourages them to move on and seek asylum somewhere else, the UK or Scandinavia. But also for those who stay, it leaves them in a vulnerable and exploitable position. As Reza says, if you're here without papers, you're like a cow that can be milked infinitely. And so you are, very vulnerable to exploitation. And that serves the purpose of the state.
Ça, j'ai vu chez mes potes, qui 10 ans après moi, ils ont papier. Et pendant 10 ans, ils ont bossé. C'est tout le monde qui profitait d'eux, quoi.
So I saw that amongst those friends that I spoke about, who we arrived at the same time, they were without paper for years, and they were completely exploited by others who had them working in the irregular labor market, without papers, without insurance, without holidays, without healthcare.
And then what do you see? So I'm thinking of what is happening in the UK, where the government is really, really hostile towards people who are seeking refuge. And yet, when you look at communities people at a community level, they are very supportive. Is that the same or is it different in France from your
Les gens sont
experience?
beaucoup plus solidaires et ils aident les gens. Est-ce que c'est la même en France, qu'il y a une différence entre l'État et les communautés?
Pas bien compris les différences entre eux.
L'État résiste, les gens, ils sont très restrictifs, ils ne veulent pas aider, mais les gens normaux, les voisins, les résidents, eux, ils s'approchent, par exemple, avec de nourriture et tout ça.
C'est vrai, bon, quand j'ai vivais dans le parc, c'était en hiver, quoi. C'était en 2008. C'est la première fois, moi, c'est la seule fois que je voyais le canal, la Seine, il était gelé. S'il n'y avait pas des gens la nuit à 3 heures du matin, 2 heures du matin, qui venaient avec du thé chaud ou café chaud, ils ne venaient pas. Des fois, ils ramenaient des couvertures. Moi, j'étais pas vivant en ce moment pour pouvoir parler avec vous, quoi.
That's the same in France. So Reza says that in that first winter when he was in France, it was bitterly cold and the canal froze over. And if it hadn't been for neighbors, people who lived locally who would come down with flasks of hot tea and covers, many people wouldn't have survived.
Ça, c'était une chose que j'étais étonné parce que j'ai jamais vu ça en Iran. On n'avait jamais le soutien d'Iraniens envers les Afghans. Et c'est la première fois dans ma vie que je voyais j'étais un Afghan, qu'il y avait un soutien des gens autour de moi qui vivaient à côté, quoi.
And in fact, I was really surprised by that. I was astonished because in all my time living as a migrant in Iran, I never saw that solidarity from Iranians towards Afghans. We would be left to die. But in France, people came out and they shared what they had.
En fait, ça dépend beaucoup de où vous avez de où vous venez. Mon expérience, c'était le pire qu'il pouvait exister sur le racisme. Moi, j'ai déjà un vécu comme ça. C'est bien sûr, quand j'arrive en France, je trouve beaucoup de choses bien. Mais quelqu'un qui n'a pas vécu en Iran, qui a vécu dans un autre pays, qui n'était pas autant raciste, c'est intéressant de voir, lui, comment il a vécu aussi.
So your life history dictates to a certain extent how you perceive things, because when I came to France and I saw that, I was thinking this was amazing because I had experienced Iran before. But for somebody who had not experienced the kind of racism directed at especially Hazara Afghans in Iran, they would be thinking that the treatment in France was not very good because we were left to sleep on the street.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Reza. How about you, Sam? What are you finding in the UK?
I think that sorry everyone, I'm having some computer issues, but I think if it's just video, if I keep the video off, it's probably going to be okay. I think that the hostile environment and things like the Nationality and Borders Act, making people be treated as offenders and rather than given support and recognised as victims is kind of made it difficult. Because it's kind of poked the people who wouldn't help with a stick, kind of. So what I see on the internet is a very vocal, what I hope is a minority, who every comment about someone who's perceived to be doing something wrong, oh, they must be an immigrant, they must not actually be a British citizen. So it's made it difficult, but like Reza was saying, there are people that are incredibly supportive. So there was an example that I was told about not long ago of a lady that had just turned up in Luton, which is an area of Chatham in Medway, with her family, and she had absolutely nothing. So she had nowhere to stay the night. She had no. She didn't even have a car actually to sleep in. So it was slightly different because she'd been displaced from wherever she was. I think she'd been a victim of domestic violence, but within about half an hour, people had turned up with food and clothes for the children and bedding as well. because she had found a place to stay, but when she got there, it was basically just an unfurnished flat, and obviously she didn't know anyone locally. So I think at a local level, there are people that want to help, but it's at the national level, less so.
Thank you, Sam. Thank you. How about you, Asia? What are you finding? What have you found?
So my main problem with a refugee experience was not exactly what is happening around me, but me myself. So what do I mean by that? Is that I, as a person who was just coming from a active war zone, and I came to a place which is completely unknown to me, and I was completely alone, which led to a lot of trauma, which made me not completely sane and fit to be a part of a new society. I was very hostile towards everyone. I didn't see a purpose in life. It was hard for me to find people, like to go and search for support. It was hard to me to, I don't know, force myself to start socializing, finding a job, just settling in a new place. Anything which was anything which was happened to me just caused an aggressive response in me. So, which really influenced me a lot. So, which leads me to thoughts like that refugees should get way more mental health support if it's possible, because because it's, for me personally, was the main problem as a refugee, because people who are just under great stress and they're displaced and they're very poor, just solving their physical needs or giving them shelter is not enough, because the most serious problems are in the head, and it causes a lot of problems with settling into a new society. Yeah, something like this.
Thank you. Yes. How about you, Zainab? What are you finding?
I think when it comes to displaced people finding a way to be welcomed in new communities, or like the issues being faced, mainstream media has a huge impact on that. And mainly I'm reflecting on displaced people who come from Muslim majority country, African countries, Arab countries, are seen as unwanted individuals or threat to societies, and due to extreme media cover on the way they see certain communities. And there has been less support of refugees in Western countries, and that's where in 2015 there has been huge protests of building a wall against Mexican people and Latin American people from coming to the US. And the media narrative has been, they bring drugs, they bring gangs, we don't want them here. Same thing with like people in the Middle East and people from Muslim countries is like, oh, they are terrorists, we don't want terrorists to be in our neighbors and that. And people from African countries, especially post Ebola, there has been all that campaign of like, people from African countries will bring disease, will bring this, we don't want our children to assemble with this. And we've seen that narrative change a lot with the Ukraine war, where there's more empathy where there is more countries in European countries welcoming Ukrainian. And we also seen African refugees who went to school in Ukraine were not able to have the same treatment. And this is where I feel like media has a huge impact in the narrative they presented about refugees, and how that impacts the public view on, do we see refugees as threats, or do we see them as a dear neighbor? And definitely skin colors plays a big role in refugee experiences from a place to place. And displaced refugees, we see them in so many form and shape of a lot of countries. And what's happening right now in Gaza is not far with the same experience my mom experienced in Somalia, being forced to flee from her country and not able to be back to her home. So definitely media plays a big role of impacting either in a negative way or a positive, depends on the communities we see in, on the forced displaced people.
Thank you, thank you. And I think your comments also bring us very nicely to the next question, which is around comic books and graphic novels. In your view, why are graphic novels important, and what can they do with or around discourses on forced migration or refugee issues? We'll start with you, Zainab, and then
I mentioned at the beginning that graphic novel is really important because we live in a society where words number is the only thing being dictated. Like, I could take a book and read about an individual story from the beginning to the end, but that does not make people connect to that individual in different level. Versus, I could say I lived in a neighborhood in Yemen, where there's like 11 members of us. We all came together, we watched TV and this. People could listen to that, but never understand. Versus, for me to describe it in this image of showing my culture, of like the way I'm wearing the hijab, the way how we celebrate community get together, my grandma, and like talking about my love to sports, coming together and watching a TV, which is usually people in other culture may sit on couch, but for certain communities, sitting in the ground is something like a very comfortable and like connecting with nature. So putting these words and stories in a graphic image helps the audience to either connect or find similarities within their culture. In my book, when I talked about like Eid celebration, I mentioned how that's similar to the trick and treat in the Yemen culture, in the US culture, where like in there we either get candies or we get money, and then it's just the way of like kids getting celebrated in during one of the holy time for the Muslim community, and that how equivalent to trick and treat, but in a different way, where people get like either money or mainly candies. There is no money involved in the situation, but kind of like showing that similarities in different culture, in this different concept. And a graphic novel plays a big role in helping individuals images to be connected. And I feel like storytelling and image is a very strong weapon to create empathy from communities to another community. And graphic novels for centuries is not something only for kids, it's something for adults and for all different ages and a spectrum in life, to understand and connect with one another through graphic novels. Those stories and images is really important, so people could understand and connect, and also for other people to be inspired. I remember one of the teachers reached out to me in the elementary school and talked about that there was a young Somali boy who was adopted by American family, who was holding, once he got this book, he was holding it in his hand 24 hours, and he was like very inspired by this. And the teacher talked to him and she was like, it seems like you like this book a lot. And the thing he said, he was like, she dressed like my mom and she had same experience like my mom. And for him to find like home and belonging with a book that he may not be able to be with his mom right now, but seeing a similar image, a similar voice, a similar experience for him, that really touched my heart. And that's the whole idea of why publish this book, is not only for non-immigrants and refugees to understand the experience of immigrants, but also to give this inspiration and give this power and courage for young people to see themselves here and to understand that they could be a change maker, they could be the star they want. And having a real story in this graphic novel is really important than the Superman and Spider-Man and all those like heroes that are not in real life. It's like creating heroes that are in real life. They went through this and they been through a lot, but then they took stages in their life to be the leaders they are, so they could open other doors for young people to know, hey, if this girl did it, went through 3 wars, and she still did it, I could do it too. So that's the whole idea of the graphic novel and why this is a very inspiring thing.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Zina. How about you, Asia?
Me?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's a question about why are graphic novels important, right?
Yes.
Okay. So of course, I just personally like graphic novels and I like visual art. And then that's the main thing which made me choose this format. But if I would be more precise, why I love graphic novels and why they're important is obviously because it's always a very personal narrative, which allows you to connect to emotions of an author on some other level, because you don't have only text and narrative and everything which is in your regular book, but you also have visuals, composition, visual style, and all of this, which is also influenced by emotions, culture, and all the background of a person who wrote the book. And this makes the reader to have even another layer of emotional connection with the author of the book. Yes, that's all.
And how about you, Sam? Why are graphic novels important, and what can they do for discourses around forced migration?
Well, the idea behind my play was to actually grow people's knowledge about human trafficking. But with a play, no matter how many people it's performed to, it's quite transient. And it can also be quite exclusive because only about a quarter of the people in the UK ever go to the theatre. So, in a 50 minutes to an hour show, you can make people think, you can make people feel, but there's no sort of clear pathway or plan of action of what to do next. Even if you buy a copy of the play, you know, reading plays is quite a specialised thing to do and quite a kind of dark, not very exciting, dry thing to do. So in order for the story to reach a wider audience and perhaps to be something that people could look at and think about at their own pace, whether they were people who had English as their first language or not, I set out to tell the story of my characters in a graphic novel. And the artwork is deliberately quite naive or childlike so that young readers can relate to it, although it's dealing with big topics. And then there's information on what jobs victims of modern day slavery might be doing or how they might look. And the book also gives information about, it gives helpline numbers, and each copy will be distributed with a bookmark, which also lists organisations that could help. But for me, I love graphic novels just because they operate on so many levels. And they've also got unique strengths. This is taken from Nate Powell's Comics Are Reading poster, Nate Powell's an award-winning graphic novelist in America. And he says comics operate on multiple levels at once, offering a more immersive, engaging reader experience than any other mass medium. And comics can make huge ideas and subjects accessible, but also, and quite importantly, because in my sort of example of the play, plays are also quite expensive to go and see. Whereas buying a comic or reading it online can be a lot cheaper. You can share it around with your friends. So comics are the most democratic mass storytelling medium, cheap, low-risk creative platforms for people to express themselves and better understand the world around them. And with so many graphic novels being fairly, the technology to produce your own graphic novel and tell your own story is fairly cheap. So you can actually get your message out there a lot easier than maybe if you were going via a traditional publishing route. So yeah, I just think they're great, they're democratic, and just very accessible. Also to people where English is not their first language, because you can look at the pictures basically.
Thank you very much, Sam. How about you, Reza?
Moi, je l'ai toujours dans mes souvenirs.
I'm sorry, I keep going back into my memories, but
En fait, je suis arrivé quand je suis arrivé à Paris.
tes souvenirs sont bienvenus.
Voilà. Et en fait, après l'histoire de quand j'ai eu mes papiers, c'était plus simple. J'ai découvert deux choses.
When I got my papers, life became a lot easier, and I discovered two things.
Bon, beaucoup de choses, mais là,
Many
je vais parler
things.
de deux choses.
Many things, but I'm going to speak
Là,
about two.
d'abord, j'ai pensé que j'ai découvert que je peux marcher dans la rue, je peux regarder les filles et je peux tomber amoureux des filles. C'était interdit pour moi en Iran parce que j'étais à Zara et à Zara, il n'a pas le droit de tomber amoureux d'une fille. Du coup, je ne regardais pas des filles là-bas.
So the first thing I discovered was it was perfectly legitimate to walk in the street, to look at girls and to fall in love with them, something that was forbidden to me as a Hazara in Iran.
Je ne ferai pas de discrimination, je regarde les garçons aussi, mais voilà.
I don't discriminate, I was also looking at boys, but anyway.
Et le deuxième chose que j'ai découvert avec la copine que j'ai trouvée, que je me permets d'avoir, c'était le roman graphique que je ne connaissais pas. C'est elle qui me présentait. Et j'ai d'abord...
It was one of my first girlfriends in France who introduced me to graphic novels.
Et j'ai utilisé beaucoup d'abord pour apprendre le langue français aussi.
And I used them to learn French.
D'abord, je ne pouvais pas me contacter avec le roman graphique. Je pensais que c'est des cinéastes ratés qui n'ont pas réussi à finir leur film, qu'ils ont sorti comme BD.
So in the beginning, I really had some trouble connecting with this form of art, the graphic novel. I thought they were probably written, designed by filmmakers who had failed and who were not successful, and so turned towards graphic novels.
Mais quand même, je continuais à lire jusqu'à le jour que j'ai tombé sur un BD japonais, Le quartier lointain.
So I continued reading until one day I came across a Japanese manga novel called A Distant Neighborhood.
Et là, j'ai découvert un art avec ce roman.
And there I really realized that actually this is really a form of art.
Et le pouvoir de parler de ce que j'ai envie de parler.
And it would allow me to say what I needed, what I wanted to say.
Avant d'arriver en France, j'ai réalisé des films. Et je voulais continuer à faire des films en France.
So before I came to France, I made films. That was how I expressed myself.
J'ai fait ça aussi. J'ai réalisé 2 documentaires, mais autoproduction, sans l'argent, voilà, avec moi-même, jusqu'à la Z, quoi.
And so when I arrived in France, I tried to continue, and I made 2 documentaries without any means whatsoever. But,
mais voilà, je regardais les autres, comment ils ont réussi, ceux qui ont réussi en tant qu'étrangers dans le pays européen de réaliser des films. Normalement, c'était eux qui ont écrit un livre, un roman avant. Et il était publié, après ils ont réussi à faire le film.
So it was really difficult for me to find a producer for my films. And I looked at who were those people who had succeeded in making their name in filmmaking in Europe. who were foreigners. And most of those were people who had written a novel or a story before they made the film.
Et là, en fait, j'ai dit, bon, ok, je vais écrire un roman, mais j'ai découvert que je suis nul, je connais pas la littérature.
So I decided, okay, I'll write a novel. Then I discovered, okay, I can't write.
Et nous, en tant qu'Afghans Hazara, on a deux grands traumas dans notre tête.
As Hazara from Afghanistan, we have two enormous trauma in our head.
La première, c'est le génocide de 1890.
The
Et
first,
50% des Hazaras, ils étaient tués.
the first was the genocide of Hazara in
1890.
In 1890, when 50% of the Hazara population was eradicated.
Il reste, en fait, dans chaque Hazara, il est dedans, quoi. Et là, ça voyage partout dans le monde, cette idée-là.
And that
C'est trauma.
That is embedded in our consciousness, and every Hazara, wherever they are in the world, or carry that trauma with them.
La deuxième trauma, c'est la guerre civile. Et moi, je suis en France, pro-Massoud.
And so now today, one of the difficulties is that I am in a France where Ahmad Shah Massoud is treated as a hero.
Donc, que nous, en tant qu'Hazara, on était victimes de cette guerre et de ce personnage.
But in fact, we Hazara were a victim of that civil war and of that person.
Du coup, je pensais sur le roman graphique. Je me suis dit, ah, personne avant moi, en tant qu'Afghan, il a fait. Si je fais de gaffe, il n'y a pas de problème.
So I thought to myself, okay, there's no other Afghans, especially not Hazara Afghans, who have tried to use this art form. So if I fail, no problem, nobody will know about it.
Et je pouvais parler des deux traumas, mais aussi de ma peuple, quoi, des deux traumas qu'ils ont dans ce livre.
And so the graphic novel allowed me to speak about these trauma and about my people in this graphic novel.
Ce qu'on a beaucoup entendu, en fait, de nos parents, chaque Hazara, et à cette année-là, après la génocide, ils ont fait des montagnes, des cerveaux, des escolotes, pour le faire peur de chaque Hazara.
So one of the stories about that first genocide was that they had created a mountain of skeletons, a mountain of skulls, in order to put fear into the heart of all Hazara. And this was illustrated in the book.
Du coup, j'ai fait la moitié de marche. Je ferai le livre, ça sera sorti en 2025. Après, je me suis donné 10 ans pour faire le film.
So instead of a novel, a textual novel, I have written a graphic book. It should be published in 25, and I've given myself 10 years to get the film made.
Bien sûr, pour l'écriture et tout, c'était la seule projet que j'ai fait, qu'il y avait un impact très dur sur moi, que j'ai tombé malade et tout. C'était une expérience bien et en même temps très, très, très douloureuse.
In fact, writing this book has been a hugely traumatic experience. It had a very heavy impact on me. It made me ill. It was a very painful experience going back into the trauma of my family and the trauma of my people. They too. That's it.
Thank you very much, Reza. Thank you. Fascinating listening to you, Reza. How there's that mix of humor, and also you're talking about really, really heavy stuff, but there's still humor in it. We've also got a number of questions. I don't know if you would like to speak to your questions, the people who are asking the questions. I think the first question is from Treus Garcia.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi. Okay, thank you. Thank you all the speakers for your nice stories. Yes, my first question was for Sanjal. This is the first time that I heard about speculative journalists, and I want to ask her more about that, like, and how she can use that in graphic novels, if she can explain a little more. And my second question was for all the speakers about these changing narratives that graphic novels can bring. So, in your experience, what type of feedback have you get from the work when you share your work, your comics, your graphic novels? What type of feedback have you received? That are my two questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, yeah. Sam, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. So speculative journalism, I would define as a thing which offers a place to imagine and relate to the impact of some of today's global issues, because stats and data can be quite difficult and quite boring sometimes to comprehend. So it helps audiences to picture the future, because fiction, human beings are just people that really enjoy stories, and so stories help to tell. But with speculative journalism, you're putting over sometimes quite complex information in a form that just makes it more easy and digestible. So, for example, there's a book that Val McDermid and Catherine Briggs recently did called Resistance, a graphic novel, which is about COVID-19. And I'd say that's a brilliant example of speculative journalism. So it's helping audiences to picture the future, basically, in a more digestible format than a novel or a newspaper report might be. So that would be my definition. Thanks for the question.
Thank you.
And then maybe just if you could repeat your question to the other speakers.
Yes, because Zainab mentioned that that for her the most important thing, or I understand that the most important thing was changing narratives. That graphic novels and comics bring these chain narratives, in this case about migration and immigrants. So the question will be how your work, your specific work, the work that you have produced, have helped to this change the narrative about immigrants. So if you have some like feedback that you have received from people that have read or see your work, if you can like share with us something.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So before, like, while I was an author, I still work with an organization for the past 6-7 years called Green Card Voices. And it's an organization that focus more on the storytelling narrative. So we have multiple books. They are also the organization who helped publish my book. So we have the publishing aspect, but then we have the programming aspect. And one of it is they have this game called Story Stitch that I helped with the designing it. And the Story Stitch is a card game that helps communities from different backgrounds to come together in a table and discuss and answer certain questions, such as like when someone felt discriminated against, and then hearing that from your dear neighbor and allowing for that empathy and mindful listening and discussion to happen helps build so much bridges. So as you remember, in 2015 we had like a huge hate crime against immigrants, the whole voting of like not allowing for immigrants. The moment we started doing the storytelling, building bridges, I have been speaking to high schools, going from middle schools and all those elementaries, talking to people, going to organization, going to universities. So having a very impact in Minnesota only helped a lot shifting that narrative. that when the Afghan crisis happened and refugees, when there had been huge refugees from Afghanistan, Minnesota was one of the countries, one of the states, allowed for more refugees to come, and that helped a lot with shifting narrative, because now we don't see them as like a refugee from other place, and it's more of like understanding the human aspect of like, we need to help, we have a commitment of helping. And refugees around the world happen, like even in the US, majority of people in the US are their ancestors are immigrants from Europe, from other places. So beside the Native Americans in the US, no one is native to this land, everyone is an immigrant. And shifting that narrative is really important. Asking questions like where someone is, their ancestry from, where they migrated, that create that sense of belonging. And with the shifting narrative, storytelling is really important, but dominating the mainstream is also important, because we allow for news channels who have certain agenda to focus on policies eliminating immigration and this, they will dominate those spaces and they will spread fear, and we really don't want that to happen. And that's why it's important for us to push on different areas of storytelling, not only through books, it also through games, through education system, through policies, through talking to people, through food. Like, why we don't talk about where food come from? When we eat tacos, do we even know where the origins of tacos and how tacos transform? Can we talk about policies within like eating the tacos? Because people just want to eat and have fun, but they don't want to talk about the whole world that's happening and the whole detention that's going on for Latin American migrants. So that's why it's important that the advocacy should not be on one direction, it should be coming from all directions, so we could center the core issue and make sure that we narrow it down until it vanished.
Thank you, Zainab. How about you, SCI and Reza? Is there anything you'd like to add to?
Well, what can I add? My work is work in progress, obviously, but for people who have already read it, I mean, my main change which I made in them is the one I'm very happy with, and the one which is one of my main goals in general is change the understanding and relationship towards Russia and its genocidal nature in general, because on the West, no one really understands what this country is about since Russian Revolution, and no one really knows about all the genocides they committed towards Ukrainians, towards Crimean Tatars, towards people towards people in Caucasus, towards Chechens, towards other people, and especially it's dangerous towards people who are Slavic, because people in the West often see us as basically Russians and they don't understand a lot of stuff. And people who have read what I did, they treat these things differently now, which is amazing, which is nice. This is very important because I mean, obviously there is like war going on right now with a lot of heavy casualties from civilians on purpose. Also, there are a lot of Russian influence abroad, which is very they're trying to influence the narrative shadily. And they're not only Ukrainians suffering from them now. For example, a lot of people who have fled Chechnya, they basically have to hide the Chechens because they will be murdered or kidnapped by Russia. Yeah, so this is something it seems I can change in people.
Thank you very much, Asia. And how about you, Rez?
Le BD que je suis en train de faire, il sort en mai 2025. Et c'est mon premier BD. Mais j'ai l'expérience des projections de mes courts-métrages et mes documentaires, si ça vous intéresse.
Okay, so the graphic novel that I'm working on will be published in May 25. So it's a bit early to say, but if you want, I can say something about the reception of my short films, if that would be of interest. Please.
Moi, quand j'ai commencé de faire de courts-métrages en Iran, j'étais un des premiers Afghans qui essayait de réaliser des films.
When I began to make my short films in Iran, I was probably the first Afghan to try to use that format in Iran.
Le sujet que j'ai choisi pour mon premier court-métrage, c'était le problème des Afghans qui sont nés en Iran, qui ne peuvent pas aller à l'école à cause de papier.
So the first film I made was about Afghan children born in Iran who are not allowed to go to school because they're not allowed to have papers.
À cette époque, la télé iranienne, il montrait toujours des séries. Et dans cette série-là, il y avait toujours un Afghan comme personnage coulon qui tout le monde rit.
So at that
qui passait tout le temps à la télé.
When I made the film, at that stage, it was really normal for there to be Afghan characters in television series, and they were usually the butt of jokes or they were criminals.
Quand les premières projections que j'ai fait avec ce film, il y avait des autres cinéastes iraniens qui étaient dans la salle. Le film a commencé, le premier dialogue qu'il a sorti de la bouche d'enfant dans le film, la salle, il a commencé à rire à cause de son accent.
So the first screening I made of the film was largely to an audience of Iranian filmmakers. And the first words uttered in the film were uttered by the Afghan child and caused an automatic reaction of laughter because of his accent.
Bien sûr, le film était autant fort pour qu'ils ferment leur gueule pendant jusqu'à 15 minutes. Mais voilà.
But the film was strong, and with the result that for the following 15 minutes that the film lasted, there wasn't a peep out of the room.
Et pourquoi vous avez ri à cause d'accent? Personne n'a répondu à cette question. Voilà. On l'a mis en face de cette réaction.
In chairing the debate after the screening, the first question was, why did you laugh when you heard the accent? And the room was just silent with shame.
Ça, c'était la réaction des Iraniens.
That was the Iranian reaction.
La réaction des Afghans, ils n'aimaient pas le film parce que tout de suite, ils disaient, tu montres la même chose qu'à la télé, encore un Afghan qui a un travail de bas, quoi. C'est un pauvre Afghan. Tu montres encore un pauvre Afghan. Du coup, ils n'aimaient pas du tout le film.
Unfortunately, the Afghans hated the film because they said, why again are you just showing a poor Afghan, uneducated, with nothing?
Voilà, c'est une expérience. Ça a continué avec les autres courts-métrages que j'ai fait et avec les commentaires que j'ai continué à faire. Les réactions, c'est pas changé. Mais la réaction française, c'était différent. Peut-être parce que moi, j'ai une structure très européenne de cinéma. Peut-être il y a ça, je sais pas.
And in fact, my films are liked more by Europeans than by Afghans, who still find it somewhat shameful that I tend to focus on people who are less educated and who are struggling more. And whereas Europeans tend to really like my film. And I can say myself, as a European watching Reza's films, I think he is amazing at showing the incredible resilience and courage and integrity.
J'ai un autre souvenir, c'est pas la réaction en face de mes films, mais c'est la réaction en face de moi, de celui que je vais aller dans le festival. Je ne peux pas raconter ou on ça après. C'est le festival que je suis allé, que les journalistes me fouillaient parce que...
Okay. Reza just wants to finish with a small anecdote. When he made the film in Iran, it was to be screened at a festival. And as an Afghan, he didn't have the right to move from one town to another. You had to have a special permit, which he didn't have. But when he went, he managed to go, given his features, that he was in fact a Japanese filmmaker. And so there was a lot of interest to speak to him, and people were chasing around to try and interview him as this amazing Japanese filmmaker. So he had to hide because obviously he could only speak Persian.
No.
I think the internet's very weak. What?
Thank you, Reza, and thank you all. How about you, Josie? How would you? What is your response to what you've read, and also, how would you answer your own questions?
To me?
Yeah.
Okay, I wasn't prepared for this. What is my? It's like it's opening more my mind about this new knowledge that I am receiving from all of you. For example, this, like I said, I didn't know about this. What was the journalist? If someone help me with that, no, speculative journalist. So yeah, I will search more about that. I copy also the reference that the speaker gave. And for me, I am also trying to that my work focus in migration, but also how we inform people about for example, human trafficking. Also, I have a comic that I did. I am from Peru, but right now I am living in Europe. So I did, when I was in Peru, I did a comic about human trafficking, and I did all the research, the interviews with the survivors. So I think it's very important, but also it's very important have this type of materials, but also it's important, like Zainab said, that we kind of have different mediums where we can talk about this, not only in books, but also how she explained very well that you can talk about like exploitation in the food in food business or in clothes. So there's like as communicators, we need to see the whole spectrum, how we can help through in our like from our corner, but also see that we are part of a society, a community, and we need to like open our eyes to and connect with other professionals, with other people, and see what others are doing and how we can shape our work also to start talking about these topics in other ways. So yes, thank you very much. And okay, thank you. That's it.
Thank you very much. Let me see if we've got another question. All right. Okay. So we've got a question from Bev about trauma. Bev, would you like to speak to your question? Is it Bev who asks about trauma? Okay, so because we are almost out of time, so maybe we go back to our speakers. Do you have any end notes, and also what are your hopes?
I could go. So I think my closing statement and my hopes will be I know someone in the chat talked about trauma and trauma healing. It's really, really tough and hard for immigrants and refugees and displaced communities to find healing in a short term or even a long term. Because when we talk about generational trauma, it's like trauma will keep going and going and going until there is a long-term solution. And sometimes, even if we are not in a space of being displaced, what's going on around us definitely triggers and brings those trauma back. And my closing sentence of this talk, especially about displaced people, refugees, and advocacy, is none of us can be free, or none of us can find justice without everyone being free and justice and going back home. As right now we are like witnessing a global genocide, what's happening with Palestinian people in Gaza. We cannot like close our eyes and decide to be in solidarity with Mexican people, be in solidarity with Ukrainian people, be in solidarity with Somali refugees, Yemeni refugees, without being the same solidarity being extended to people who are now over 1 million people being forced to be refugees and displaced from their own home with what's happening right now. So educate yourself about the experience of refugees, not only in one area or in one continent, but globally. And I don't want to be celebrated as one successful stories when we are not acknowledging of the millions of stories that a lot of them are not, we cannot hear them because they're basically dead, they're being killed. And these are the stories that we have a power to elevate and speak up. And I don't want my book to be a part of a history. I want my book to be like the end of refugees, the end of people being forced to flee. So we all go back to our countries and our home to have home and to live our life normally without seeing another refugee experience happening. And I wish Ukraine have a peace. I wish in Iran, in Afghanistan, other places, people go back to their home and have peace. And in order for that to happen, we should not only fight for our own cause, we should fight for humanity cause. And that's my message.
Thank you very much. How about you, Reza, Asia, and Sam? What are your closing
En
thoughts?
fait, bon, ma mère, elle me disait que je suis un chameau. Dans notre culture, chameau, c'est celui que si on le fait mal, il n'oublie pas. Et moi, je suis un bon chameau. Tout le mal que l'État il a fait, la société il a fait, je n'oublie pas. Je le crie à n'importe quelle façon que je te fais, des livres, au film.
My mother has always said that I am a camel. And in our culture, a camel is the one who doesn't forget. And I will not forget all of the pain inflicted by the states, by governments. And I will take that pain and I will write about it in any way that I can, in graphic novels, in films, any way, I will try to shine a light on it.
Je suis content d'être avec vous et j'aimerais rencontrer un jour de tous ceux qui sont participants.
Very happy to have been here, and I hope very much that I will have the opportunity to meet you all in person one day.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Reza, and feel absolutely honored to be speaking with you. How about you, Asia and Sam? What are your closing remarks and also your hopes?
So I think most of the other panelists during the discussions have mentioned that graphic novels are
Yeah, I think we hear you now. Sam, I think we hear you.
Great, fantastic. I just keep losing it. So yeah, so graphic novels, a great way to speak about your own story, to engage with wider and different audiences, to change the narrative. But I think for me, it's changing opinions one person at a time as each person reads the book. So my aim is to get funding to get the book out to schools and libraries so that young people can then talk about it with their parents, so that young people and their parents can open a discussion about maybe if their parents have different views than they do, more, shall we say, antiquated, old-fashioned views. So yeah, that would be my aim. But yeah, thanks for letting me be part of the discussion. Sorry, my computer technology has let me down a little bit.
I think it is one of those days. Yeah, but thank you for your contribution. And
Thank you.
Asia.
What can I say? So I don't know. The most of the thing, I just hope all refugees will be able to go home, because if they want to, of course. Because in my experience, if I will compare stuff which happened to me when I was on front line and stuff which happened to me during life as a refugee, I don't know what traumatized me worse. To be honest, I think being a refugee is one of the being forcefully moved to a completely unknown world is one of the worst things which can happen to a human, and it is lasting for not only for this person but for their descendants, and it's a very complicated issue, and you will never be properly able to heal from this and everything and all other obvious stuff. So I just hope that at least Ukrainians will be able to go home in the most close years. And that's all I can hope for now, unfortunately. And that's already not very realistic.
Thank you, Asia. So I think it is now for me to say thank you to our speakers. We've been listening to Asia, who is a graphic novelist and illustrator from Kharkiv, Ukraine. She studied animation and motion design at the Kharkiv Academy of Design and Fine Art. In 2021-2022, she had a work-in-progress graphic novel project in collaboration with Ukrainian writer Yuri Andrukovich, based on his book Recreations. The project was cancelled due to war. Asia lived in Kharkiv in the Saltivka district when the Russia-Ukraine war started, and hid underground in Kharkiv during the siege. With support from the Lex International Comics Art Festival, she moved to Lancashire in the United Kingdom, where she currently lives. Her Arts Council England-funded graphic novel Fallen Tree gives an account of her experiences of the war. Zainab Abdi is a Black Muslim, Middle Eastern, and immigrant woman who is passionate about social justice and advocacy. She graduated magna cum laude from St. Catherine University with triple majors in political science, international studies, and philosophy. She started attending Columbia University in the fall of 2021. A graphic memoir, Voice for Refuge, chronicles a journey from Somalia to Yemen and Egypt, and ultimately to the United States, and is told and illustrated in both English and Arabic. Zainab works alongside the youngest ever Nobel Peace Prize winner, Malala Yousaf, as a youth advocate for girls' education. She has spoken at the United Nations several times, and her story was featured in Malala's book, We Are Displaced. Zainab was appointed by Minnesota Governor Tim Walz's office to serve in the 2019 Young Women's Cabinet. In her free time, Zainab enjoys playing soccer, biking, and mentoring young leaders to be civically engaged. Reza Sahibdad is an Afghan cinematographer living in France, who, together with Yann Damezin, a French artist, has completed a graphic autobiography. Reza was born and grew up in exile in Iran, where he began making films. He returned to Afghanistan before traveling to Italy to collect a prize for a short film. After being granted asylum in France, he created 2 full-length documentaries, We Are the Walking Wounded and Welcome to Paristan. As we've also speaking alongside Reza, because Reza only speaks French or Farsi, has been Dr. Liza Schuster, a reader in sociology at City University London, who has been translating. And our final speaker has been Sam Hall, who is a writer and illustrator from the UK. Sam started adapting her play, My Mind is Free, about 4 victims of human trafficking into a graphic novel of the same name during the pandemic. The play and the graphic novel are inspired by real life stories which have been fictionalized. So again, thank you for joining us, and thank you to all our speakers for your contributions. Our next session starts at 4 p.m. The Zoom link will stay the same. So join us at 4 if we look forward to continuing the conversation. Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias.